Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Gehman.
And I'm Kirby Gehman.
And we're here from MASH, the Manitoba Association for Schooling at Home. And today we're going to answer some of your homeschooling questions.
So another popular question is socialization. What about socialization? We hear that from non-homeschoolers, we hear that from new homeschoolers. What is socialization?
Well, I think this is really interesting because I think that question, what about socialization, is kind of it's like a knee-jerk reaction. Like people hear homeschooling and they're like, what about socialization? Because they've heard people ask that question and they think it's an important question. And I think that there are two concepts being mixed up in that question. So the first is that socialization is actually a sociological term that describes how, called mores, values, ideas, ways of operating in society are passed from one generation to the next generation. So there's a sociological term that says how we teach children, and it's not active teaching. It's kind of this magical way that we pass on to children how they're supposed to act.
Like how they fit into society, sort of.
Yeah.
How to behave in a group of people.
What it means to be a civilized person in our society. That's what socialization is.
So what's the other meaning?
Well, I think that sometimes when people are asking what about socialization, they're not actually asking how are we going to teach our children to be civilized? Because if we're concerned about teaching our children to be civilized, our children are not going to learn how to be civilized in a classroom of other 5-year-olds, right? And I know this is a story you always say, right? What do you always say when people ask this question?
I don't want my 5-year-old to learn to behave from other 5-year-olds. I want my 5-year-old to learn to behave from older kids and adults.
Yeah. So really, when we think about socialization, so I never quite know how to answer the question because what about socialization? Well, my kids are actually being more socialized in the sociological term in my home because they're learning how to be civilized from me. And I like to think I'm a fairly civilized person. So, and yeah, my kids have bad habits, right? Like I do not have this all figured out, but a group of 5-year-olds left to themselves will struggle to figure out how to share effectively, right? And so we do send our kids to school to learn about socialization, but that happens from the teachers, that happens from the adult staff, that happens if you have a community that's doing intergenerational learning. I think when people ask the question, what about socialization, is really what they're asking is, what about socializing? What about friends? People are worried that when their kids are home all day, they're not going to have friends. And that's a totally different question than the sociological question, what about socialization? So if what you're asking is, well, how's my child going to learn to make friends? How's my child going to learn to be a friend? Where is my child going to discover friends? There's kind of a joke in homeschooling world. Why do we call it homeschooling when we're never at home? Because before the pandemic, homeschoolers had so many places where we could go and meet together as groups. Homeschoolers know that there's some things that are easier to do in large groups. It's easier to play soccer and baseball in a large group. And so when homeschoolers want to participate in those activities and they can't find places in the regular system to do that, then they come together and they start their own little leagues. They do community art lessons. There's all sorts of places that offer lessons during the day for homeschoolers, where homeschoolers go. The Ys each offer regular programming.
There's field trips. People go to the farm, they go to the park, they go to the zoo, they go to the museum.
Yeah, and sometimes they're group field trips. MASH, we have a not back to school picnic every fall. It's kind of a highlight. We've had it now for, 30, maybe even 40 years. May have started long before I had kids, because MASH has been around a long time.
And that's pure socialization. That's not even socializing. That's pure socializing. That's not even pretending to have an entertain or an education aspect to it.
Yeah. Right? So Now, it does complicate things during COVID when we are
Yes.
concerned about social distancing and illness and being in closed spaces. And so I think that all homeschoolers, even veteran homeschoolers, are feeling the confines of living in a world where we can't socialize. And I don't think that that's any different.
Adults are feeling that too.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know that I have answers for how we help our kids make friends and socialize in a time when it's hard to be social, when being social can bring illness. I do know that if our kids learn to if they're learning socialization from us, if they're seeing us interact kindly and politely in our homes, if they're seeing us share, if they're seeing us handle conflict, then those are all skills that they can take into friendships outside the house. I had 5 children, so my children learned a lot of skills just in sibling behavior. We learned how to share, we learned how to give space, we learned how to respect. So maybe in COVID, when we're all trapped in our houses, there's even more socialization going on.
Is it a bad thing that kids want to be with their friends, want to be with their peers, their age group peers?
That's a huge they're all complicated questions.
Yes.
Stop asking me complicated
questions. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but and you can't get upset when kids want to go be with their friends.
Right.
And that's often behind the question, what about socialization?
Yes.
Kids have friends. Kids want to see their friends. They get upset when they can't see their friends. They want to go to school to see their friends.
Yes.
And that's a lot of where the what about socialization question comes from.
Yes, and there is certainly some concerns that some of our children are too peer attached. They're too peer oriented. And so if you have a strongly peer attached child and you are bringing them home to homeschool them, and then you are taking them away from what might be their primary attachments, that can be very difficult on a child. That can be very alarming on a child. And so if you're going to take them away from some of their primary attachments, then you're going to have to make space for them to grieve. You're going to have to make space for them to be frustrated. You're going to have to make space for them to be angry. And you're going to have to work really hard to nurture your own attachment so that you can become the primary attachment for your child. And this is a whole other element. And if you're more interested in it, I strongly recommend that you look at Dr. Deborah Macnamara's work in Rest, Play, Grow, or Dr. Gordon Neufeld, How to Hold On to Your Kids, Why Parents Matter More Than Peers. But so that's sometimes what happens. Yeah, our children are attached to their peers. And then when we take that attachment away, that's a really tough and difficult thing. And I think when that's happening, when our kids feel really angry, really lonely, really upset, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. We just have to make space for that. We have to try to find ways for them to maintain some connections with those people. And then we really have to work hard to make sure that our connection grows and strengthens in those times.
So the folks that have been homeschooling for a long time, what about socialization, can actually be a very different question than someone who is pulling their kids, say, because of COVID, who kids have been in school for their whole lives.
Yes.
It can be a very different question, and it comes with its own different problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And so sometimes when new homeschoolers or media often ask about what about socialization, I don't have a quick answer because I need to tease out what exactly is their concern around asking that question. So hopefully we've answered some of the facets of that question and left you understanding it more.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting or helpful, please like and subscribe. You'll find more videos answering more questions on our channel.
You can also check out our webpage at manitobahomeschool.com.
Or look us up on Facebook under Manitoba Association for Schooling at Home.
Take care.